Okay, so this week's Parsha is Parshas Va'eira, begins on page 319 in the Art Scroll Stone Clemens. That is Shmos chapter 6, verse 2. It begins, Hashem spoke to Moshe and said to him, I am Hashem. I appeared to Avram, to Yitzchak, and to Yaakov as Kel Shakai, but with my name Hashem, I did not make myself known to them. Moreover, I established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, the land of their sojourning in which they sojourned. Moreover, I have heard the groan of the children of Israel, whom Egypt enslaves, and I have remembered my covenant. Therefore, say to the children of Israel, I am Hashem, and I shall take you out from under the burden of Egypt. I shall rescue you from their servant. I shall redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great judgment. I shall take you to me for a people, and I shall be a God to you. And you shall know that I am Hashem, your God, who takes you out from under the burdens of Egypt. I shall bring you to the land about which I raised my hand to give it to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and I shall give it to you as a heritage. I am Hashem. So the introduction, the first verse of this conversation, Hashem spoke to Moshe and said to him, I am Hashem, and I appeared to Avram, to Yitzchak, and Yaakov as Kel Shakai, but with my name Hashem, I did not make myself known to him. What does that mean? That's very cryptic. So Rashi explains that, or really our sages explain that the names of Hashem are, a name is something that we are used to identify someone or describe them, reveal their essence. With Hashem, we have no conception of Hashem's essence. The only conception we have of Hashem is what he reveals to us through the interaction with this world. Hashem is from outside, is more than from outside this world, but Hashem created this world. But we know Hashem, what we know comes from how Hashem interacts with this world, and the names of Hashem are the different ways that Hashem interacts with the world. So Rashi says that the name Hashem, the Yud, the Hey, the Vav, the Hey, is Hashem fulfilling his promises. That Hashem, whereas the name Kel Shakai is the name that Hashem gives guarantees. Hashem makes promises. The name Hashem is when Hashem fulfills the promise. So he's saying that I made all kinds of, so Rashi says that Hashem is telling Moshe, I made all kinds of promises to the patriarchs, to Avram, to Yitzchak, and to Yaakov, but they never saw their fulfillment. And that's how the continuation, my name Hashem, I did not make myself known to them. Wherever I established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, that he's saying, I told them that I gave them this covenant, that they were going to get the land, but they never actually saw that for the fulfillment of that. They just had promises. Whereas it's going to be, you're going to witness the fulfillment. You're going to witness the fulfillment of that promise. That's the name of Hashem, which is the fulfillment of the promise. The Ramban has a different approach. That the Ramban understands that the name Kel Shakai the name Shakai. I'm saying Shakai. It's a Shin Daled Yud. It's the same word as like Dayenu. The Dai is Dayenu, which means enough. Dai in Hebrew means enough. And it's our sages say that means Sha'amar La'olamo Dai, that he said to the world enough, meaning that the world was growing quantitatively and qualitatively. When Hashem said, our sages say Hashem told the world to come into existence and immediately started growing, and Hashem said stop, meaning there's a point that it has to stop improving, and that's the point where it's mankind's role to finish that. Our sages say that if not for Hashem stopping that, saying die enough, we would have had bread growing straight out of the ground. And what that means is that Hashem left space for mankind to make its mark on the world. So, and that's represented by, instead of grain growing out of the ground where man would grind it and harvest it, and where I'm a little out of order, but man would toil in growing it, and then we would harvest it and grind it up, and then need to bake it or mix it and bake it. We would have just had bread growing from the ground. But that's not how Hashem told the world, stop and leave man with a job to do to finish it. So we have to finish the job. And the Ramban says that this name of Kel Shakai is where Hashem interacts with the world in a natural way. Meaning that there's boundaries, there's rules that the world operates in, and Hashem works within those rules, that there are laws of nature, and Hashem doesn't break those laws of nature. That it's where Hashem performs miracles, but they're miracles that aren't outside the bounds of
Well, not like what Moshe
right, not like these miracles. It's not rivers turning into blood and things of that nature. So, and that's what the name of Hashem comes from Haya Hova V'yeh, that Hashem was, is, and will always be. That's about Hashem's that Hashem exists completely independent of this world and the physical rules of this world. So, and that's what he says. I'll make myself known to you, and completely outside any bounds and outside any rules of the physical world. And so he says that when it comes to our patriarchs, we don't really find many, at least explicitly in the Torah, we find almost no out and out miracles of that nature that don't fit in the natural laws. That are say there's a medrash that Avram, our patriarch Avram, was thrown into the furnace by Nebuchadnezzar, and he wasn't burned. That's really that's a medrash. But in the Torah, in the written Torah, you don't really find any miracles that happen to our patriarchs that are not outside the laws of nature. But now in Egypt, he's saying that now you're going to experience things that have never been experienced before and that are completely unruled by the world's laws. Okay. So what does he say in verse 6? Therefore say to the children of Israel, I am Hashem. And then he says 4 different expressions of being saved from Egypt. I shall take you out from under the burden of Egypt is 1. I shall rescue you from their services 2. I shall redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great judgment. And I shall take you to me for a people and be a God to you. That's 4 different expressions of how Hashem's going to redeem us from Egypt. And the mitzvah to drink 4 cups of wine at the Pesach Seder is symbolizing these 4 expressions and corresponding to these 4 expressions of how Hashem, the different stages with which Hashem redeems us from Egypt. And then it continues in verse 8, I shall bring you to the land about which I raised my hand to give it to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So that symbolizes the 5th cup, which is the cup of the Kos Shel Eliyahu, the cup of Eliyahu, which is on the table but is not drunk. Okay. So moving on page 321. So Moshe spoke accordingly to the children of Israel. They did not heed him. And then Hashem told Moshe to tell Paro, and he said Paro won't. They didn't listen. Paro won't listen. And then it goes through the lineage of Moshe and Aaron. It begins on page 14. These were the heads of their fathers' houses, sons of Reuven and the sons of Shimon. It goes through the sons of Reuven, the sons of Shimon. Where are we? Sons of Levi, Gershon, Kas, and Merari. I don't think it has it here. Okay, yeah. Gershon, Kas, and Merari, and then it goes past that. The sons of Gershon, the sons of Kas, Amram, Yitzhar, Chevron, Uziel, and then it talks about Merari, and then Amram, who was from Kahas, had Moshe and Aaron. So it finally gets to Moshe. Moshe and Aaron. So our sages say that why is this mentioned? It's in order to say that we understand that it's Hashem who picked Moshe and Aaron as the leaders, and they weren't usurpers or self-promoters. That the Torah is telling us that Hashem went through each family. They went through the family of Reuven. There was nobody who was the firstborn. There was nobody who would be the right person to lead the Jews out of Egypt. Then to Shimon, there was nobody there. Then to Levi, now we found families that were appropriate for this mission. And we went through the families of Levi till they came to Moshe and Aaron, that these are the ones who are the right ones. Okay. So now on verse 28, it was on the day when Hashem spoke to Moshe in the land of Egypt. Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, I am Hashem, speak to Paro, king of Egypt, everything I speak to you. Moshe said before Hashem, behold, I have sealed lips, how shall Paro heed me? So Hashem said, Aaron will speak for you. And then in verse 3 on page 325, but I shall harden Paro's heart, and I shall multiply my signs and my wonders in the land of Egypt. Paro will not heed you, and I shall put my hand upon Egypt, and I shall take out my legions, my people, the children of Israel, from the land of Egypt with great judgments. And Egypt shall know that I am Hashem when I stretch out my hand over Egypt, and I shall take the children of Israel out from among them. So it says that I'm going to tell you to tell Paro to take them out, and I'm going to harden Paro's heart, so he won't listen. So what's the purpose of this whole charade then? If meaning why, if the purpose was to take the Jewish people out of Egypt, so why is Hashem hardening Paro's heart so he won't listen? So our sages say that, of course, if Hashem wanted the Jews to leave Egypt, they would just leave Egypt. But that was not the purpose here. The purpose was in order there should be a revelation of God in the world. And it's a revelation of God to the Jewish people, but a revelation of God to the world as a whole. And Egypt was the most advanced civilization at the time. And so it wasn't like God defeated or the Jewish people overcame this backwoods, third world country, where that would be okay, and it wasn't. And if this backwoods third world country recognizes, okay, God defeated us, the Israelite God defeated us, so what would people say? Oh, they're a bunch of primitive who know what's. But now that it was Egypt, it was the great superpower that's recognizing God's supremacy over them. So that's something that the whole world will look at and say, there's something real here. Because the most advanced society is recognizing that it's the Israelite God that is all powerful. Okay, so it says in verse 6, Moshe and Aaron did as Hashem commanded them, so they did. Moshe was 80 years old and Aaron was 83 years old when they spoke to Paro. So why does that need to be mentioned? So it happens to be that this helps us a lot in dating things, because when we see that Moshe is 80 years old, we know pretty much when he was born. We know that he was 120 when he died. It helps a lot with dates and with ages. But so why is it necessary to say how old Aaron was? And he was 83 years old. So I saw I think it's what Shimon Schwab says, that remember how when Moshe was born at a time where the Egyptians had a decree, there was a decree that every baby boy who's born should be thrown in the river. And Moshe was saved by his mother hiding him, and then she put him in a basket and floated him in the Nile, and Paro's daughter found him. But there was a decree when he was born that every baby boy would be thrown in the river. And then when Aaron was born, Aaron was 83. He was 3 years older when he was born. That was at the time that Paro had commanded the midwives for the Jews to kill, let every baby girl live, and to kill every baby boy as they're exiting the womb, and telling them that it's a stillbirth. So this was telling Paro, like, you think you're so powerful. Look, you really don't have any power. Whatever you do whatever happens is in Hashem's hands. And these two people standing in front of you, by your command, shouldn't be alive, yet here they are right in front of you. Okay, in verse 8, Moshe and Aaron did. I'm sorry, what?
Same Paro that.
So that's actually a disagreement in the right. So it's actually a disagreement in the commentaries on in Parshas Bo, in Parshas Shemos, that it says that a new king arose over Egypt. So there was a disagreement if it was actually a new king, or if it was the same king, because he acted differently. Yeah. So let's see if I can find it. Right, so Rashi says there, so it's on page 301 in Parshas Shemos, that's in verse 23, chapter 2, verse 23. It says, during those many days it happened that the king of Egypt died. So Rashi brings a medrash that it doesn't mean that he actually died, but that he had saras, he had the leprosy or a skin disease. And it says that he was slaughtering Jewish babies and bathing in their blood to heal himself. And there's other opinions that it means literally that he died, in which case it would be a different Paro at this point. But okay, but in verse 8, on page 325, Hashem said to Moshe and Aaron, saying, when Paro speaks to you, saying, provide a wonder for yourself, you shall say to Aaron, take your staff, cast it down for Paro, become a snake. That's what he did. And in verse 11, Paro too summoned his wise men and sorcerers, and they too, the necromancers of Egypt, did so with their incantations. Each one cast down his staff, they became snakes, and the staff of Aaron swallowed their staffs. The heart of Paro was strong, he did not heed them as Hashem had spoken. So the sages say that Egypt was the center of magical wisdom and of sorcery. And Paro had his sorcerers imitate Moshe, and they laughed at him. They said, like, this is what you're doing? You're coming with these like magic tricks to the center of sorcery, to the greatest center of sorcery. So they said, like, it's like bringing I don't remember exactly the expression. It's like bringing coal to like the coal town. Like, we don't need it. We have it already. So Moshe answered them, no, it's the opposite. That when you have something really, really good, let's say you have a beautiful diamond. So you don't bring it to some what are they called? National or you don't bring it to some diamond store on Eisenhower. You don't bring it to a jewelry store in Eisenhower. You go to the diamond district. You go to where people really know diamonds and they appreciate such a stone. That if you have a $1,000 diamond that you could bring to your local diamond store, but if you have a $100,000 diamond or you have a $1 million diamond, that you bring to the people who know diamonds, that who could really appreciate its value. So he's saying that what I have is something that's way above anything that exists in this world, and I'm bringing it to the real experts. I'm bringing it to the center of sorcery, so you recognize what it is and appreciate what it is. Okay, so continuing in verse 14, Hashem said to Moshe, Paro's heart is stubborn, he refuses to send the people. Go to Paro in the morning, behold, he goes out into the water, you shall stand opposite him at the river's bank, the staff that was turned into snake you shall take in your hand. You shall say to him, Hashem, the God of the Hebrews, has sent me to you, saying, send out my people so that I may serve me in the wilderness. But behold, you have not heeded up till now. So says Hashem, through this shall you know that I am Hashem. Behold, with the staff that is in my hand, I shall strike the waters that are in the river, and they shall change to blood. The fish life that is the water shall die, and the river shall become foul. Egypt will grow weary of trying to drink water from the river. Okay, and that's what they did. And all the water turned to blood. So the commentaries point out that there's a very key phrase here, and that is very revealing about these Zamakas, about the plagues, and that is in verse 17 where it says, so says Hashem, through this you shall know that I am Hashem. And I say this every year, but this is, I think, the really important part on the Parsha that I saw at first in the Malbim, but the Kli Yakar said something very similar, and he quotes it from the Abarbanel, so it's actually older. Now that I think about it, the Abarbanel actually was not that long before the Kli Yakar, but he quotes it in the name of the Abarbanel. That in the Haggadah we say that the 10 plagues, and we say that someone, I don't remember bad with names, gives a siman, gives a sign to remember it, and that is Titzach Adash Ba'achav. That's to remember the 10 plagues. Titzach is Dam Tzfardei Akinim, that blood, frogs, and lice. Adash is Orev Dever Shchin, that's the wild animals, the animals that died, and the boils. And Be'achav is Barad, hell. Arba is locust. Choshech is darkness. And then the last base is Bechoros, the death of the firstborn. So the commentaries say that it's not just a way to remember them, that's not so hard to remember the 10 plagues, but this is revealing that these three words, Titzach, Adash, Ba'achav, are three groups, that each group had its own identity and its own purpose. And this verse, in order that through this you shall know that I am Hashem, is telling us the meaning of the first three plagues. And that's in order that you shall know that I am Hashem. And the first three groups are the blood, the frogs, and the lice. And the Malbim points out that the first two of each group of three and the last one of four, but he says that the last one, the Malchus Bechoros, the death of the firstborn, doesn't count because that wasn't that was the one that actually got them to send out the Jews, and that was its purpose. So the first two of each three really came with a warning, and the third one did not. The third one of each three did not have a warning associated with it. And he says it's because the first two were two witnesses to the testifying as to what each group was proving to Paro, the lesson that each group was bringing. And the third one was a punishment for not listening. So he's saying, so the first two here, the dam and Tzvardea, the blood and the frogs, are a message to that I am Hashem. And that is that the Nile River, the river, was what the Egyptians relied on for their sustenance. That's what the bounty of Egypt came from, is that every year the Nile River overflows its banks and brings water and fertilizing and health to all the fields in Egypt, and that's where their agriculture comes from. And they worship the Nile for that reason. That they saw the Nile as the source of their blessing and a source of their bounty. So by Hashem striking at the Nile, in a sense, Hashem striking at their worship, at what they trust in, and proving I am Hashem. And the next one is Tzvardea, the frogs, which also came from the river. And if you look at the plague of frogs, so this is on page 329. Where am I? Some froglets, yeah, they ate them. So, okay, so it says there, chapter 8. Oh, none in there. In verse 26, Hashem said to Moshe on page 329, verse 126, Hashem said to Moshe, come to Pharaoh and say to him, so said Hashem, send out my people that they may serve me. But if you refuse to send out, behold, I shall strike your entire boundary with frogs. The river shall swarm with frogs. They shall ascend and come into your palace, into your bedrooms, into your bed, into your house, and your servants and your people into your rooms, and into your ovens, your kneading bowls, and into you and your people and your servants will the frogs ascend. And our sages say that a big part of what the frogs bother them was the noise of the frogs, that the whole land was full of frogs, and it was the sound, and that was the chorus of the frogs. Our Chaim says that it was that the frogs were because the Egyptians caused us to cry out, or that they tortured us with noise to keep us up at night, so we'd never have rest. And that noise of the frogs was a torture for the Egyptians. And I saw asked that if that frogs are considered, like the sound of frogs is considered relaxing. That like people go out into the nature, they say that a majority of the sound we hear are actually frogs. And you get like one of these white noise machines or like relaxation noise. They have like they have a frog chorus thing to relax with, to help us relax.
It can get loud.
It can get loud, but it's a nature sounds. Yeah. So I saw there's a drush that they say as to this, is that there's a medrash. This is actually part of the introduction to Parak Shira. That David HaMelech, King David, as I said, I would speak about this, when he finished writing the Psalms, so he was very proud of himself and proud of his accomplishment. And he said, is there anyone who praised you, Hashem, as much as I have? And I don't remember if Hashem said to him or a frog hopped up and said to him that I praise Hashem to a much higher level than you do. And said that there's this mitzvah that I do, that there's a creature that gets its food from the seashore, and it eats me, and I provide its sustenance, that it eats frogs. And then Parak Shira, it says, Parak Shira is a medrash that brings the song that different of Hashem's creations sing as part of the heavenly symphony or really the earthly symphony, how the earth praises everything on the earth praises Hashem. And it says the frogs praises Baruch Shem Kavod Machasol Olam Va'ed. Blessed is the name of Hashem for all eternity, or the kingdom of Hashem for all eternity. The name of the kingdom of Hashem for all eternity. I'm sorry. And which is something that we say quietly because it's the holiest. It's so holy that we only say it out loud at Yom Kippur. And this is the song of a frog. What's it like so special about a frog that it could sing this song? So the commentaries say that the frog, in the frog's explanation about what it does so great, its mitzvah, is that it gets eaten. That it gets eaten, meaning that it has a role to fulfill in this world. That Hashem created the world in perfect harmony, where every part of the world, I say, like in science class, they call it like the ecosystem. When there's the food chain and there's all kinds of cycles. There's a water cycle and the carbon oxygen cycle. And the world, Hashem created the world in perfect harmony, where everything created has its place, has its job to do in this world. And the frog's answer to King David was that the song that I sing, the part that I play in creation, I do my part. I fulfill the role that's given to me and that's asked of me. And could you really claim that you do that? So he said, my song is even greater than yours because I do my job. I do my job 100%. I fulfill my role. And it's something we have to ask ourselves. Are we as good as a frog? Do we do what's expected of us in this world? And that's the Baruch Shem Kavod Machasol Olam Va'ed. Blessed is the honor of the name of Hashem's kingdom. Hashem's kingdom is this world that we're all in there to serve Hashem. And the frog does its service as is expected of it. And that's kind of brought out in this section where it says that they shall ascend in verse 28. They shall ascend and come into your palace, and your bedrooms, your bed, into the houses, into your ovens, and into your kneading bowls. They would jump into the ovens and get burnt up. But that was their job. That's what their role was at that time. So that's what they did. And that was that noise that the croaking of the frogs, that was the noise that Egypt couldn't handle. Was the message the frogs were sending is that we have a role to play, we have a purpose in the world, and that was something that Egypt couldn't tolerate. Okay, that was a nice word. Okay. So that was another message of in order that you know that I am Hashem, that even the frogs follow the role that I assigned to them. So that's the first two. Okay. Then there's the punishment of which is the lice, and then if you go to page 331, verse 16. Hashem said to Moshe, arise early in the morning and station yourself before Paro. Behold, it goes out to the water. And again, that's another thing the Malbim says, is that the first of each cycle of 3 was said in the morning when Paro goes to the water. That was said by the plague of blood as well. And that was kind of a poke at Paro because Paro claimed himself a deity. And so he never went to the bathroom in front of anyone. And what he did is he would go early in the morning, he would go out to the Nile and relieve himself. And Moshe went to meet him there in order that he would see, I know what you're up to. And so he said to him, so says Hashem, send out my people that they may serve me, on page 333, verse 17. For if you do not send out my people, behold, I shall incite against you, your servants, your people, and your houses, the swarm of wild beasts, and the houses of Egypt shall be filled with the swarm, and even the ground upon which they are. And on that day I shall set apart the land of Goshen upon which my people stands, and that there shall be no swarm so that you will know that I am Hashem in the midst of the land. Again, we have Hashem giving a purpose of this, so that you will know that I am Hashem in the midst of the land. So for the next 3, which are the wild animals, this is Tzach Adash, the wild animals, the animals dying, and the boils, was again, the purpose of that was in order that you know that I am Hashem in the midst of the land. And that means that not only am I God, but I'm involved in the world. I'm intricately involved in the world, and separate people based on their actions. And I make distinction, meaning not only that there are those that say that, okay, God created the world, but what interest would God have in what these lonely earth creatures are doing in the scheme of this massive creation, in the scheme of the massive universe? So Hashem's saying, I am Hashem in the midst of the land, that I am aware and involved in the lives of every single person. And that is done by, and how is this giving that message? As it says, that I shall set apart the land of Goshen upon which my people stands, and I shall make a distinction between my people and your people. Hashem saying that that the first ones, the blood, that could be a localized thing, or the lice, there could be just lice here. But while the animals, they move from place to place. And if they're staying here and stopping right at the border, so that tells us that this is the area that God wanted struck. God says this should be struck, this shouldn't be struck, and also by the animals dying. Also, we've learned pretty recently in our recent history is that diseases don't stay, diseases don't stay within borders. That there's this disease started in China, and somehow a few months later, weeks to months later, it's here. And if the disease stayed in those borders, here's the border of where the Jews live, and it stops right at the border, that tells us something. That tells us that God's involved in our life, and that God is separating between these people and these people. Okay, so that was the animals. So that was, where is this? Where was I? Okay, yeah. So that was first the wild animals and the animals' death, and then there were the boils, which once again came without a warning. And just as an aside, the second plague of every cycle, as it says, and you can see by the animals dying on page 335. It says, Hashem said to Moshe, come to Paro and speak to him. And here it says, come to Hashem. If you look at the second one of the first cycle, which was the frogs, there again it says, Hashem said to Moshe, come to Paro and say to him. In these cases also, it was come to Paro, that took place in Paro's, he's going to Paro instead of meeting him at the river. That means going him in his palace, in his throne room in front of all the people. So the first one was a private meeting when he's making his pit stop. And the second one was in front of all his court. Okay, and that was the plague epidemic where the livestock died, but the Jewish ones did not die. And the sixth one was the boils, where he had him, no warning, told him, get these ashes, throw it up, and everywhere where it lands on the Egyptians, they'll have boils. Okay, so then on page 337, we have the seventh plague, which was hail. And again, this is the beginning of one of the cycles of three. So I'll just go back to page 335 at the bottom, verse 13. Hashem spoke to Moshe, rise early in the morning, again, early in the morning, and station yourself before Paro, and say to him, so said Hashem, the God of the Hebrews, send out my people that they may serve me. For this time I shall send all my plagues against your heart and upon your servants and your people, so that you shall know that there is none like me in all the world. So again, he's revealing the purpose of the last three of this cycle, and then you have the death of the firstborn. But the last three before the death of the firstborn is to say, so that you shall know that there are none like me in all the earth. And the Kli Yakar explains that Paro was a polytheist. I think that's the word, that he was a pagan who believed in many deities, which means that there were many powers, that this deity had the power that this one didn't have, this one had this power that this one didn't have. They had all kinds, each one had their own power. And this was and he illustrated that he was all powerful. I think the Malbim says with the hail that it was a mix of fire and water, which are it's the mix of fire and ice, which are two opposites. Fire and water don't exist well together. But here you had this ice, which is water, and fire within it that was falling on the Egyptians and showing that Hashem's completely in control of the elements, that even opposites could be put together. And by the where was it? And which is the first one in next week's Parsha, is the locust swarm, where there also it says that the locust blocked out the sun. It blocked out the eye of the earth, which is the sun. So meaning that the Egyptians worshipped the sun, that was you had the power of darkness and the power of light. They had like their god of darkness and the god of light. And here it was daytime, the sun was out, but it became completely dark by this locust cloud, the darkness overpowering, to show that Hashem has power even over the sun, which is something that they worship. I think their high god, the Ra, was the Egyptian sun god, right? I believe that they had their sun god, and it was showing that Hashem could completely block out the sun. Okay, and another thing he points out is, let's see if I could find it. Oh, is that in verse 18, you see, behold at this time on page 337, behold at this time tomorrow I shall rain a very heavy hail, such as there has never been in Egypt. He says about the plague that it's something that's never been before. And then again in the next plague, which is next week's Parsha, but we'll just look at one thing there on page 341. It says, where am I? Oh, not there. And so in page 343, you can see in verse 14, it says, the locust swarm ascended over the entire land of Egypt. It rested the entire border of Egypt very severely. Before it, there was never a locust storm like it, and after it, there was never its equal. Again, it says that it's something that's never happened, and never happened again. And again, this is showing that Hashem's all-powerful, that Hashem's creating things that have never existed before. And that's message of the last three of these last three plagues before the death of the firstborn, is that Hashem is all power. There's no power other than Hashem. And the Parsha ends on page 339, verse 33. Moshe went out from Paro in the city and stretched out his hand to Hashem. The thunder and hail ceased. This is for the plague of hail. Rain did not reach the earth. Paro saw that the rain, the hail, and the thunder ceased. He continued to sin. He made his heart stubborn, and he and his servants. Paro's heart became strong. He did not send out the children of Israel as Hashem had spoken through Moshe. Okay, shkoyach.
Ellen, you want to stick around for Mar?